The sound of my phone vibrating against the wooden coffee table shattered the quiet Sunday morning. I glanced at the caller ID, not recognizing the number. For a split second, I considered letting it go to voicemail, another telemarketer, perhaps, but something compelled me to answer. Hello? My voice sounded cautious, even to my own ears. A beat of silence, then, Serena? Serena Ashcroft? I hadn't heard that name in 15 years. Not since I'd legally changed it to Serena Kimball, taking my adoptive parents' surname at 18. Who is this? I gripped the phone tighter, already knowing the answer, a cold dread washing over me. It's me, Diana. Your mother. The world tilted sideways. I sank into the nearest chair, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. I don't have a mother, I said, my voice flat. Not anymore. Diana's breath hitched. Please, Serena, just listen. I have nothing to say to you. Each word felt like broken glass in my throat. It's your father, she rushed on, desperation evident. Victor had a heart attack. He's asking for you. Of course. They hadn't wanted me for 15 years. Why else would they reach out now except in a moment of crisis? That's not my problem. I surprised myself with how steady I sounded. How detached. Serena, please. Her voice cracked. He might not make it. I closed my eyes, memories flooding back unbidden. My 13th birthday. Diana and Victor's faces as they told me they were sending me away. That they wanted to start fresh with Victor's new wife, Camille, and her children. That there wouldn't be room for me in their new life. We'll visit, of course. And you'll love the Kimballs. They've always wanted a daughter. Empty promises from people who signed away their parental rights 6 months later without a backward glance. Where is he? I asked finally, not sure why I was even asking. Mercy General. Room 415. Hope crept into her voice. Will you come? I'll think about it, I replied coldly, and ended the call. I stood frozen in my kitchen, the silence deafening after Diana's voice. My Sunday ritual lay abandoned, the coffee half prepared, the newspaper unread. Evidence of a peaceful life interrupted by ghosts. My husband, Mark, appeared in the doorway, concern etched across his face. Everything okay? I looked at him, this man who had loved me through the broken pieces, who had held me through nightmares and panic attacks, who had never once made me feel unwanted. My biological father had a heart attack, I said, the words sounding strange even to my own ears. Mark's eyes widened. Your father? The one who? Yes. I cut him off. That one. He moved toward me, wrapping his arms around my rigid form. What do you want to do? Did I want to see the man who had thrown me away like yesterday's trash? Who had chosen his new wife and her children over his own flesh and blood? Who had left me to cry myself to sleep at the Kimballs' house for months, waiting for visits that never came? Nothing, I said, pulling away from Mark's embrace. I want to do nothing. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew I was lying. Because part of me, the broken, abandoned 13-year-old who still lived somewhere inside me, wanted answers. And another part, the stronger, rebuilt adult I'd become, wanted them to see exactly what they had thrown away. The hospital corridor stretched before me, antiseptic and unforgiving as I made my way to room 415. Each step felt heavier than the last. Mark had offered to come, but this was something I needed to face alone. I paused outside the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the small window, I could see a withered figure in the bed, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. A woman sat beside him, her once brown hair now streaked with gray. Diana. The years had not been kind to her. The soft curves of her face had hardened into sharp angles, deep lines bracketing her mouth and eyes. She was thin, too thin, her collarbone protruding beneath her blouse. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remembered the day they dropped me off at the Kimballs. How Diana had hugged me stiffly, promised to call that weekend, and then slipped back into the car without a backward glance as I stood on the unfamiliar porch, clutching my hastily packed suitcase. I pushed open the door. Diana's head snapped up, her eyes widening as they landed on me. "Serena," she breathed, rising to her feet. "You came." "I came," I repeated, making no move to embrace her or approach the bed. "You said Victor wanted to see me." "Well, here I am." Diana flinched at my cold tone. "He's been in and out of consciousness. The doctors say." She trailed off, glancing at the still figure in the bed. "They're not optimistic." I nodded, unsure what to say. Part of me, a vindictive, wounded part, wanted to ask why they thought I would care. Another part felt numb, disconnected from the scene playing out before me. "You look good," Diana ventured after an awkward silence. "Healthy. Happy." "I am," I replied. "No thanks to you." She winced, her gaze dropping to her hands. "We made mistakes, Serena. Terrible ones." "Mistakes?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what you call throwing away your child? A mistake?" "It wasn't like that," she protested weakly. "It was exactly like that." My voice rose, and I forced myself to take a deep breath. "You chose your new family over me. You signed away your rights. You never called, never visited. Not once in 15 years. Tears spilled down Diana's cheeks. We thought we were doing what was best for you. The Kimballs could give you so much more than we could." "Best for me?" Fury rose in my chest. "Or best for you and your fresh start with Camille?" Before Diana could respond, a weak voice croaked from the bed, "Serena?" I turned to see Victor's eyes, the same deep brown as mine, open and fixed on my face. He looked frail, a shadow of the strong, vibrant man I remembered. His skin was sallow, his cheeks sunken. "You came," he whispered, a trembling hand reaching toward me. "I didn't take it. Diana said you were asking for me." Victor nodded weakly. "I needed to see you. Before you die?" I finished bluntly. "Why? You haven't needed to see me for 15 years." Diana made a small, distressed sound. "Serena, please." "No," Victor rasped. "She's right." He struggled to sit up slightly, wincing in pain. "We abandoned you, Serena. There's no pretty way to say it." His honesty surprised me, momentarily deflating my anger. "Why?" The question that had haunted me for 15 years finally escaped. "Why did you throw me away?" Victor's eyes filled with tears. "I could tell you it was complicated. That Camille didn't want another man's child in her home. That I was weak and selfish and made the worst decision of my life. But there's no excuse that will ever be good enough." I stood there, absorbing his words, feeling oddly hollow. I had imagined this confrontation countless times, screaming, crying, making them feel every ounce of pain they had inflicted on me. But now, faced with Victor's frailty and apparent remorse, I felt nothing but emptiness. "I have a life," I said finally. "A good one." I'm a pediatric psychologist. I help children who have been abandoned, abused, forgotten. I turned my trauma into something meaningful. I paused, letting the implications sink in. I also have a husband who loves me. Who would never dream of throwing me away for someone new? Diana made a choked sound, fresh tears streaming down her face. Good, Victor said, his voice barely audible. You deserve that. All of it. Yes, I agreed. I did. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. I glanced at my watch. I should go. I've said what I came to say. Wait, Diana pleaded. Please. We've been trying to find you for years. After we realized what we'd done. I froze. Years? You expect me to believe that? It's true, Victor confirmed weakly. The Kimballs moved. Changed their number. We had no way to contact you. If you had truly wanted to find me, you would have, I countered. I'm not exactly hiding. Diana pulled a folded newspaper from her purse with shaking hands. We saw this article last month. About your work with foster children. It had your picture. I recognized the clipping, a feature in the local paper about the trauma clinic where I worked. My small, professional headshot smiled back at me from the page. That's how we found you, Diana continued. And then Victor. She gestured helplessly toward the bed. I felt a crack in my armor, a tiny fissure in the wall I'd built against them. But it wasn't enough, not after 15 years of silence. I need to go, I repeated, turning toward the door. Serena, Victor called, his voice stronger than before. I know we have no right to ask anything of you. But please, don't disappear again. Even if just to tell us to go to hell. Don't let us lose you a second time. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the doorknob. You didn't lose me, I said quietly. You threw me away. And with that, I walked out, leaving the scent of antiseptic and regret behind me. So that's it? You're just never going to speak to them again? Mark's question hung in the air between us as we prepared dinner that evening. His tone wasn't accusatory, just curious, perhaps a little concerned. I chopped vegetables with more force than necessary, the knife hitting the cutting board with rhythmic thwacks. I don't know, I admitted. What would you do? Mark considered this as he stirred the sauce simmering on the stove. I can't say. I've never been in your position. He paused. But I do know that forgiveness sometimes heals the forgiver more than the forgiven. I shot him a glare. They abandoned me, Mark. Signed me away like I was a car they didn't want anymore. I know. His voice was gentle. And nothing excuses that. But they're clearly remorseful. After 15 years, I interrupted. 15 years of nothing. And now Victor might die, so suddenly they want absolution? I shook my head vehemently. No. They don't get to ease their consciences just because time's running out. Mark set down his spoon and moved behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. I'm not saying forgive them for their sake, he murmured against my hair. I'm saying consider it for yours. Carrying this anger, it takes a toll, Serena. I leaned back against him, letting his warmth seep into my rigid spine. I'm not angry, I lied. Mark's soft chuckle vibrated against my back. Of course not. That poor carrot just deserved to be decimated for existing. I glanced down at the cutting board, where I'd reduced a carrot to tiny, uneven pieces. Despite myself, I laughed, a small, wet sound that threatened to turn into a sob. I hate that they still have this power over me, I admitted quietly. That after all this time, they can still make me feel like that unwanted 13-year-old. Mark turned me in his arms, his blue eyes serious as they met mine. They only have the power you give them, Sarah. Remember what Dr. Levine always says. Forgiveness isn't about excusing the behavior, it's about freeing yourself from its hold, I recited, quoting my own therapist back at him. I know. But it's not that simple. It never is, he agreed. Just think about it. That's all I'm asking. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Mark pressed a kiss to my forehead before returning to the stove, giving me space to compose myself. As we ate dinner, conversation drifted to safer topics: Mark's upcoming photography exhibition, the possibility of adopting a dog from the local shelter, whether we should repaint the guest bedroom. Normal, everyday concerns that had nothing to do with the past that had come roaring back into my life. But later that night, as Mark slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Images flashed through my mind: Victor in that hospital bed, diminished and desperate, Diana's tear-stained face, the newspaper clipping with my professional headshot. Had they really been looking for me all these years? Or was that just another lie to ease their guilt? I thought of the Kimballs, warm, generous people who had taken in a broken teenager and loved her back to wholeness. They hadn't replaced my biological parents, but they had shown me what real parental love looked like. Unconditional. Steadfast. Elizabeth Kimball had held me through countless night terrors. James Kimball had sat patiently with me through hours of sullen silence, never pushing, just being present until I was ready to talk. They had attended every school event, cheered at my graduation, helped me move into my college dorm, and cried with pride at my wedding. They were my real parents in every way that mattered. So why did the thought of Victor dying without reconciliation fill me with such unease? I rolled over, burying my face in the pillow. The answer, when it came, was unwelcome but undeniable, because despite everything, despite the abandonment and the years of silence, Victor and Diana were still a part of me. Blood of my blood. The people who had given me life, if not much else. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was a 13-year-old girl still inside me who needed to hear them say they were sorry. Really sorry, not just because death was at the door. With a sigh, I reached for my phone and typed out a text message to the number Diana had called from. I can't promise anything. But I'll come back tomorrow. 2 p.m. I hit send before I could change my mind, then turned off my phone and curled against Mark's sleeping form, seeking comfort in his solid presence as I finally drifted off to sleep. I arrived at the hospital the next day precisely at 2 p.m., my steps measured and deliberate as I made my way to Victor's room. I had dressed carefully, a tailored blouse and slacks, professional and put together. Armor, of a sort. A doctor was just leaving as I approached, his expression grim. He nodded politely as we passed each other in the doorway. Diana sat in the same chair as yesterday, her posture slumped with exhaustion. She straightened when she saw me, hope and uncertainty warring in her eyes. "You came back," she said softly. I said I would. I glanced at Victor, who appeared to be sleeping. His complexion had a grayish tinge that hadn't been there yesterday. "How is he?" Diana's shoulders sagged. "Not good. The doctor says." She swallowed hard. "They don't think he'll make it through the night. His body is shutting down." I nodded, a strange numbness spreading through me. After 15 years of absence, I would lose Victor all over again, this time permanently. "Serena," he rasped suddenly, his eyes fluttering open. "You're here." I moved closer to the bed, still keeping a careful distance. I said I would come. Victor's lips curved in a weak smile. Always were, a woman of your word. Even as a little girl. The unexpected memory pierced through my defenses. I remembered how Victor had taught me to shake hands properly when I was 5, explaining solemnly that a person's word was their bond, and a handshake sealed it. Promise only what you can deliver, Starlight, he'd said, using the pet name I'd almost forgotten. Victor, Diana interrupted gently. There's something we need to show Serena. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a worn, leather-bound book. My breath caught as I recognized it, my childhood photo album. I had left it behind in the chaos of being shipped off to the Kimballs, and I'd assumed it had been thrown away or lost. We kept it, Diana said, holding it out to me. All these years. I took it with trembling hands, the familiar weight and texture sending me hurtling back through time. I opened it carefully, as if it might disintegrate at my touch. The first page held a photo of Diana in a hospital bed, sweaty and exhausted, but beaming with a newborn me in her arms. Victor stood beside them, looking simultaneously terrified and awestruck as he gently touched my tiny fist. The happiest day of my life, Diana whispered, watching my face. You were so perfect, Serena. So beautiful. I turned the pages slowly, moving through the milestones of my early childhood. First steps. First day of kindergarten. Ballet recitals and soccer games. Birthdays and Christmases. In every photo, I saw the love in their eyes as they looked at me, undeniable, unguarded love. What happened? I asked, my voice barely audible. How did you go from this? I gestured at a photo of the three of us at the beach, laughing in the sunshine, to signing me away. Diana and Victor exchanged a pained look. After the divorce, Diana began hesitantly, things were difficult. Victor had lost his job. I was working 2 minimum wage positions just to keep us afloat. We were drowning in debt. The apartment was being foreclosed on. I remember, I said. We had moved 4 times in 2 years, each place smaller and shabbier than the last. There had never been enough food, enough heat, enough of anything. Then Victor met Camille, Diana continued. She was wealthy. Established. She had a nice home in a good school district. And she seemed to really care about him. She did care, Victor interjected weakly. But she was particular. About her life. Her children. She didn't want me, I said flatly. Diana looked down. She said her children were still struggling with their father's death. That adding another child to the mix would be too disruptive. But she would accept Victor, I clarified. Victor's eyes filled with shame. I told myself I was doing what was best for everyone. That the Kimballs could give you stability, opportunities we couldn't. That you'd have a real home instead of being dragged through our mess. And at first, we did plan to visit, Diana added, her voice catching. To stay involved. But Camille didn't want reminders of Victor's past, I finished for her. So you chose her over me. Simple as that. Victor's breathing became labored. Not simple, he rasped. Contemptible. Unforgivable. But I want you to know, Serena, the moment the adoption papers were signed. I knew I'd made the most monstrous mistake of my life. Diana nodded, tears streaming down her face. We tried to undo it. To revoke the adoption. But it was too late. The Kimballs had legal custody, and they'd moved out of state. And Camille threatened to leave if we kept pursuing it, Victor admitted. I was a coward. the lowest form of life. I chose my comfort over my child. The monitors attached to Victor started beeping more rapidly. A nurse hurried in, checking the readings with a concerned expression. His heart rate is too high, she warned. He needs to stay calm. I stepped back, overwhelmed by the conflicting emotions surging through me. Anger. Grief. A terrible, unwanted understanding. The nurse adjusted something on one of the machines and left, casting a warning glance over her shoulder. What happened with Camille? I asked once we were alone again, almost against my will. Victor's laugh was a dry, broken sound. She left anyway. 3 years later. For a wealthier man. And you? I looked at Diana. Where did you go? I stayed, she said simply. I couldn't leave him like that. Not when I'd been complicit in what we did to you. One of us had to face what we'd done. I stared at her, trying to reconcile this worn, remorseful woman with the mother who had driven away without a backward glance. For years, we tried to find you, she continued. But the Kimballs had moved, changed their number. The adoption agency wouldn't give us any information. We hired a private investigator, Victor added weakly. 5 years ago. He found nothing. And then we saw that newspaper article, Diana concluded. It felt like fate. Like one last chance to at least tell you how sorry we are. How wrong we were. I looked down at the photo album still in my hands, at the smiling faces of a family that no longer existed. I can't forgive you, I said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They both nodded, accepting this like a long-expected blow. But, I continued, surprising myself, I understand a little better. And I don't hate you. Not anymore. Victor's face crumpled, tears slipping from the corners of his eyes. That's more than we deserve, he whispered. The monitors started beeping again, more urgently this time. The nurse rushed back in, joined by a doctor. They moved with the controlled urgency of medical professionals facing a crisis. You need to step out, the doctor ordered, barely sparing us a glance as he worked over Victor. Diana and I moved into the hallway, standing awkwardly side by side as chaos erupted in the room. Through the small window, I could see them placing defibrillator paddles on Victor's chest, his body arching as electricity coursed through him. Diana's hand found mine, clutching it desperately. For a moment, I considered pulling away. Then I remembered how she had held my hand through childhood illnesses, nightmares, first day of school jitters. I let her hold on. Minutes stretched into an eternity as we waited, frozen in that antiseptic hallway. Finally, the doctor emerged, his face grave. We've stabilized him for now, he said. But I need to be candid, his heart is severely damaged. Each episode like this weakens it further. You should prepare yourselves. Diana's grip tightened painfully on my hand. Can we go back in? The doctor nodded. Briefly. And try to keep him calm. Any stress could trigger another episode. We re-entered the room to find Victor looking diminished, almost translucent against the white hospital sheets. His eyes found mine, a question in them. I'm still here, I said, answering the unspoken query. Relief flooded his gaze. Serena, he whispered. Can I ask one thing of you? I hesitated, then moved closer to the bed. What? Tell me about your life. Please. Who you became. I glanced at Diana, who nodded encouragingly. So I began to talk. About the Kimballs and their unwavering support. About studying psychology, driven by a need to understand my own trauma. About my work with foster children and adoptees. About meeting Mark at a charity event, his quiet steadiness calling to something in me. Victor listened intently, his eyes never leaving my face, as if trying to memorize every detail. Diana sat beside him, her hand still clutching mine, drinking in the story of a life they had missed. "You did well," Victor said when I finished. "Despite us. Or maybe, because of what we put you through." "That doesn't excuse what you did," I replied. "No," he agreed. "Nothing does." A strained silence fell over the room, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. "When I was little," I said suddenly, before everything fell apart. "Were you happy? With me?" Diana's sharp intake of breath was almost a sob. "Oh, Serena. We were so happy. You were everything to us. Then what you did, it makes even less sense." Victor's hand trembled as he reached for mine. This time, I didn't pull away. "Fear," he said simply. "Fear makes people do terrible things. I was afraid of poverty, of failure, of watching you grow up with nothing. But in trying to give you everything, I gave you nothing that mattered." His fingers were cold and papery against mine, so different from the strong, warm hand that had once lifted me onto his shoulders to see parades. "I don't have the right to ask," he continued, his voice fading, "but if there's any way at all, that someday you could think of forgiving us." The monitors suddenly erupted in a cacophony of urgent beeps. Victor's hand went slack in mine, his eyes rolling back. "Victor!" Diana screamed. Medical staff flooded the room, pushing us toward the door. "You need to leave," a nurse ordered, already beginning chest compressions. Diana resisted, her face contorted in panic. "No, please, he can't." I pulled her into the hallway, surprised by my own strength as I half-carried her to the nearby waiting area. She collapsed into a chair, her body racked with sobs. "He can't die," she kept repeating. "Not now. Not when we just found you again." I sat beside her, numb and disconnected, watching the clock on the wall tick away the minutes. 20 of them passed before the doctor approached, his expression grave. I already knew what he would say. "I'm very sorry," he began. "We did everything we could." Diana's wail of grief echoed through the sterile waiting room. I listened to it as if from a great distance, feeling nothing but a strange, empty ache. Victor, my father, my abandoner, a dying man seeking redemption, was gone. Gone before I could decide whether to forgive him. Gone before I could fully process the complicated tangle of emotions his reappearance had stirred up. Gone, just as suddenly as he had left me 15 years ago, but this time without any chance of return. As Diana sobbed beside me, I realized I was crying too, quiet, stunned tears that seemed to come from some deep, hidden place I'd thought long sealed shut. I wasn't crying for the man who had abandoned me. I was crying for the father I had lost twice, first to cowardice, and now to death. The funeral was small, just Diana, me, a handful of Victor's coworkers, and Mark, who stood beside me like a sentinel, his hand steady on the small of my back. No sign of Camille or her children, though Diana told me they had divorced over a decade ago. Perhaps she'd found another wealthy man with no inconvenient baggage. Perhaps she was busy with her own life, unaware of Victor's passing. Either way, her absence felt like a final indictment of the choices that had torn my family apart. As the minister spoke of forgiveness and redemption, I found myself thinking about the photo album, now sitting on my bedside table at home. The happy family in those pictures was gone forever, but the memories, the good ones, before everything fell apart, had unexpectedly resurfaced. Victor teaching me to ride a bike, running alongside with his hand steadying the seat. Diana braiding my hair before school, her touch gentle as she worked through the tangles. Both of them applauding wildly at my first piano recital, their faces glowing with pride despite my fumbled notes. They had loved me once. Deeply, genuinely loved me. And then they had broken that love, shattered it beyond repair with one terrible, unforgivable choice. But did that erase the love that came before? Could it? I didn't have an answer as I watched Victor's casket being lowered into the ground. All I knew was that grief and anger and a strange, reluctant compassion were tangled together inside me, impossible to separate. Diana stood alone at the edge of the grave, looking small and lost. In that moment, she reminded me painfully of myself at 13, watching their car drive away from the Kimball's house. Before I could question the impulse, I moved to stand beside her. Not touching, not offering hollow words of comfort, just present. She glanced at me, surprise and gratitude mingling in her reddened eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For being here." He didn't deserve it, but... I didn't come for him, I interrupted, my voice low. I came for me. She nodded, accepting this with the same resignation she'd shown in the hospital room. Of course. As the ceremony concluded and the small gathering began to disperse, Diana turned to me. "I won't ask anything more of you, Serena. You've already given more than we had any right to expect. But if you ever wanted to talk, or ask questions, or even just to tell me to go to hell in person." She pressed a small piece of paper into my hand. "This is my address. And my phone number. I'll be there. Always." Mark approached, his expression questioning. "Ready to go?" I nodded, pocketing the paper without looking at it. "Yes." We turned to leave, but something made me pause. "Diana?" She looked up, her face transparently hopeful. "Yes?" "The photo album," I said. "Thank you for keeping it. For giving it back to me." Her smile was watery but genuine. "There's more. Photos, school projects, things you made us. If you ever want them." "Maybe," I said, not committing to anything. "Someday." As Mark and I walked back to our car, he squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I considered the question, feeling the weight of Diana's paper in my pocket. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I think I might be, eventually." The drive home was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. As we pulled into our driveway, Mark turned to me. "What are you going to do about Diana?" I sighed, leaning my head back against the seat. "I have no idea. Part of me wants to throw away her address and never look back. But another part needs closure," he suggested. "Maybe. Or maybe just answers to questions I haven't even formed yet." I looked over at him. "What do you think I should do?" Mark shook his head. "I can't tell you that, Sarah. This is your journey. But I can tell you that I'll support whatever you decide. If you want to meet with her, I'm there. If you want to burn her address and never speak of her again, I'll light the match." I laughed despite myself, the sound unexpectedly freeing. "I love you, you know that?" I had some idea. He leaned over to kiss me softly. "Let's go inside. Today was hard." That night, as Mark slept beside me, I found myself staring at the photo album again, tracing the images of a happier time. Family vacations. Birthday parties. Ordinary moments made extraordinary by the miracle of photography. I thought about Victor, now resting beneath the earth, his quest for redemption cut short. About Diana, alone with her regrets, offering a tentative bridge across the chasm of 15 years. About the Kimballs, who had chosen me when my own parents wouldn't, who had loved me through the worst of my pain. And about myself, no longer the abandoned child, but a woman with choices of her own to make. I couldn't forgive Victor and Diana. Not yet. Perhaps not ever completely. But maybe I didn't have to forgive to find peace. Maybe understanding was enough for now, understanding that they were flawed, selfish people who had made a terrible mistake that haunted them for 15 years. That their regret, late as it was genuine. I pulled out the piece of paper Diana had given me, studying the address written in her familiar handwriting. A small apartment in a modest part of town. Not the lifestyle I imagined she'd envisioned when she and Victor had made their fateful choice. Before I could change my mind, I reached for my phone and typed out a text message. I'm not ready to meet yet. But I have questions. Maybe we could talk on the phone sometime. I hit send, then set my phone aside, feeling something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But perhaps the first tentative step toward a different kind of closure than I'd imagined. The Kimballs had taught me that family is more than blood, it's choice, commitment, steadfast love through difficult times. Victor and Diana had failed that test spectacularly. But as I drifted toward sleep, Diana's tear-stained face as she watched the casket lowered into the ground hovering in my mind, I wondered if there might be room in my heart for a different kind of relationship someday. Not parent and child, that bridge had burned long ago. But perhaps something new. Something honest. Something built on the ashes of what was lost rather than the false promise of what might have been. Not for their sake. For mine. The coffee shop was busy, a low hum of conversation providing a comforting anonymity as I waited, repeatedly checking my watch though I knew I was early. 3 months had passed since Victor's funeral. 3 months of cautious, stilted phone conversations with Diana, building toward this moment. I spotted her the instant she walked in, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, her posture tentative as she scanned the room. When our eyes met, she paused before making her way to my table. "Serena," she said softly. "Thank you for meeting me." I gestured to the chair across from mine. "Sit down." We ordered coffee, the mundane ritual providing temporary relief from the weight of our history. When the barista left, silence descended, heavy with unspoken words. "How are the Kimballs?" Diana asked finally. "They're well. They're my parents in every way that matters." The statement wasn't meant as a weapon, just a truth we both needed to acknowledge. Diana nodded, accepting this with surprising grace. "I'm glad that they loved you when we failed to." She reached into her purse and withdrew a small velvet box. "This was your grandmother's. Victor wanted you to have it." Inside was a delicate gold locket, engraved with intricate patterns. I opened it to find a tiny photograph of me as a newborn beside a recent one from the newspaper article that had led them back to me. "I had it sized to fit," Diana explained. "It belongs with you." I closed the locket, running my thumb over its surface. "Thank you." "Serena," Diana said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I know we can never be what we should have been to each other. But is there any chance at all for something new?" I considered her question, thinking of the photo album at home. Of Mark's unwavering support. Of the Kimballs who had shown me what true parental love looked like. "I'm not looking for another mother," I said finally. "But maybe we can build something different. I don't know what that looks like yet." Diana's eyes filled with tears. That's more than I dared hope for. As we parted ways outside the coffee shop, Diana hesitated. Can I call you next week? I nodded. Yes. That would be okay. She smiled, a genuine smile that momentarily erased the years of grief from her face. Thank you, Serena. For today. For everything. I watched her walk away, feeling a curious lightness. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first tentative step towards something new. Something built not on the ruins of what was lost, but on the truth of who we had become. The locket felt warm against my skin, a tangible connection to both past and present. I walked home through the afternoon sunlight, ready to tell Mark about my decision to move forward, not for Diana's sake, not even for Victor's memory, but for my own healing. Some wounds never fully close. But perhaps they can become part of our strength, reminders of what we've survived and what we've built from the wreckage. I had built a good life. And now, perhaps, I could build a new kind of peace.